You're watching live from Paris here on France 24. Good to have you with us. These are our headlines this hour. The biggest cultural cooperation between China and France, an offshoot of Paris's modern art museum, the Centre Pompidou, opening in Shanghai. President Emmanuel Macron and China's Xi Jinping will inaugurate it this Tuesday after promising to tear down walls at a trade fair earlier this morning. Transcripts of closed-door impeachment inquiry hearings are now being released in the US. They show how the US ambassador to Ukraine felt she was being threatened. On Monday, 4 more officials from Donald Trump's administration defied subpoenas to testify. And India's Supreme Court is calling on the country's various political parties and authorities from New Delhi and beyond to work together to tackle the ongoing pollution problem. The government has declared a public health emergency. Also coming up this hour, in our business update, we'll be looking at Uber reports of another massive loss. But the boss of the ride-hailing firm says they will still be profitable by 2021. Stephen Carroll will be bringing us all of the details on that. And film director Costa Gavras tells France 24 about some of the key social questions his latest movie explores. Adults in the Room is a film that looks at the background to the Greek financial crisis and the austerity measures put in place with the European Union as a result. Connecting through culture, French President Emmanuel Macron is in Shanghai for the inauguration of an offshoot of Paris's Centre Pompidou museum. On his second state visit to China, Macron is focusing on building bridges and hoping to increase access for French and European companies there. Macron is also being called on to use the visit to speak out about more taboo topics, including the ongoing unrest in Hong Kong and the plight of minority Muslims in Xinjiang. Well, we can cross now live to our correspondent in China, Charles Pellegrin, who's standing by for us. Charles, firstly, tell us more about this new museum being opened in Shanghai.
Well, this project was finalized by Emmanuel Macron last year. It's a 25,000 square meter structure on the banks of the Huangpu River in Shanghai. There'll be about 100 works from the Paris collection that will be presented there, works from such masters of modern arts as Pablo Picasso or Miro, as well as contemporary artists. This is the first sort of offshoot of the Pompidou Museum to be opened outside Europe. The other two are in Malaga and Brussels, and this is a 5-year partnership between France and China. France is bringing to the table the prestige of the brand of the Pompidou Modern Art Institution, as well as its expertise in museum management, and China is bringing to the table the infrastructure, the actual property involved. And because this is China, there is some quite heavy government oversight. Indeed, all of the works presented in the museum have to be approved by Chinese authorities beforehand. And there's a belief on the French side that this cultural aspect of diplomacy, this sort of what they're calling a sincere and open dialogue between cultural scenes, between the civil societies, is actually useful and could possibly trickle down to other areas of the relationship, be they economic or cultural. So really, this should be seen as sort of a symbol of the sort of increased dialogue between France and China, and just another element of this bilateral relationship.
And meanwhile, Charles, let's take a closer look at that dialogue and relationship between the two countries. We've reached pretty much the midway point of Macron's second state visit there. What do we expect going forward?
Well, after the visit of this museum in Shanghai and the inaugural speeches, the president will be having a private dinner with Xi Jinping and his wife. Emmanuel Macron's wife will also be present in a prestigious restaurant in Shanghai. This is quite rare in Chinese protocol. Generally, the president only has these meals within the strict protocol of Beijing. So this is quite a rare event, and this is basically the response to that private dinner that Xi Jinping and his wife had with the presidential couple in Beaulieu-sur-Mer in the south of France in March when Xi Jinping visited France. And this is really a sign of the sort of closer ties between Paris and Beijing since Macron has taken the presidency. In 3 years, the two men have met 6 times actually. After that, he'll be taking a flight to Beijing, and on Wednesday, with the official Beijing protocol, will be taking place with a meeting with Xi Jinping at the Great Hall of the People on Tiananmen Square, followed by a banquet and then a meeting with the Prime Minister Li Keqiang. We can expect some contracts to be signed there. About 40 contracts are expected to be signed, as well as a deal between the EU and China over geographic indicators. This is to protect products that come from a specific region, things like champagne, for instance. And this is also the forum in which potentially France can talk about more taboo subjects in private, possibly the handling of the protest movements in Hong Kong or the massive internment campaign against the Uyghur minority in Xinjiang. But again, that would be done in private.
Okay, Charles, thanks a lot for that. Charles Pellegrino coming to us live from China. And indeed, mentioning there, the French president has been called on to raise more taboo topics like the plight of Uyghur Muslims in China or that ongoing arrest in Hong Kong as he meets with Xi Jinping. On that note, Xi Jinping himself expressed his high degree of trust in Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam as the pair met in Shanghai this Tuesday. Moving on now, and 4 US officials have defied subpoenas to testify at the impeachment inquiry into the US president on Monday. The Justice Department saying that the lead lawyer for the National Security Council is immune from being compelled to appear before House investigators on that issue. Transcripts of closed-door hearings are now being released. In one of them, the former US ambassador to Ukraine says she was warned that Trump's lawyer and his allies were planning to do things to her. Our Washington correspondent Ketevan Gorgistani has more details.
These transcripts simply confirmed and gave more detail to some of the things that we already knew from these initial private hearings. And Marie Yovanovitch, who explains in those transcripts really what went on, she said she was shocked to see the words used by the President of the United States to talk about her. The fact that she was mentioned in presidential calls also shocked her. And she gave some details as to what happened when she went to the State Department to express her concerns at what was going on, to ask for advice. And one of the people who gave her an advice as to how to deal with the smear campaign was Gordon Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the EU, who apparently told her to use the president's preferred means of communication, Twitter. He told her to tweet a message of support, a message of praise for Donald Trump in order to save her job. Now, there was another transcript that came out today. It was that of Mike McKinley. He is a former top advisor to the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and he confirmed what happened to Marie Yovanovitch. He said himself in those transcripts, he testified that he had gone multiple times to officials at the State Department, asking the State Department to come out publicly in support of its ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, and that every time he was shut down, and he said that that was one of the main reasons why he decided to resign just a couple of weeks ago.
Meanwhile, making it official, the Trump administration has now filed the paperwork to withdraw the US from the Paris Agreement, that international pact to fight climate change that was signed in 2015. The process of withdrawal will be complete the day after the next presidential elections in the US. All of the leading Democratic presidential contenders have said they would re-engage with the deal if they were elected. Restrictions on cars and on construction in New Delhi continue. The government there has declared a public health emergency as pollution reaches dangerous levels. India's Supreme Court on Monday calling on officials in Delhi and neighbouring states to start working together to improve air quality.
Delhi's tourist attractions invisible from just a few hundred meters away. The world's most polluted capital city is facing its worst pollution in over 3 years, and it's proving unbearable for tourists and locals alike.
I just arrived yesterday, and this is when I got me this mask, because just not possible to breathe without.
The pollution in Delhi is very bad, and we're facing difficulty breathing, and there's a burning sensation in our eyes. It's as though someone's put chili in them.
Particles smaller than 2.5 microns can damage the respiratory system. The World Health Organization's maximum safe limit for these particles is 25 micrograms per cubic meter of air. Monday's reading in Delhi was 613. After authorities squabbled over how to get a grip on the problem, license plate-based traffic restrictions are now in force. Critics have said the new law doesn't tackle the core issue.
If air pollution was solely due to the vehicular traffic, then this would be a solution. Right now, it cannot be a solution because motorized private transport has a very small share in the whole pie.
India's Earth Sciences Ministry blames vehicular emissions for 41% of the pollution in New Delhi. But compounding the problem is the burning of crops in neighbouring states as farmers prepare to sow their fields, as well as fireworks set off during last week's Diwali celebrations. Emissions from construction sites and factories are also contributing. For now, schools remain closed and construction remains halted. India's Supreme Court has called for all political parties to work together to put an end to the smog.
A look now at some other news in brief. Catalonia, one of the major issues being debated by contenders in Spain's forthcoming general elections. Acting Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has been heavily criticised for his government's handling of that crisis. In a televised debate, he said he wanted to make it clear that any unsanctioned independence referendum would be considered a crime. Spain returning to the polls for its fourth general election in as many years. One person killed and at least 45 injured in Indian-administered Kashmir, a grenade attack in the centre of that main city, Srinagar. It's the bloodiest incident since New Delhi stripped the region of its special status, ultimately taking back full control of it last August. And on the streets for a third week running, thousands in Chile demand better social services and an end to economic inequality. Sparked by a hike in the price of travel on public transport, the demonstrations have turned violent at times, and at least 20 people have been killed. According to the United Nations, 3.7 million refugee children around the world are out of school, denied what is a basic human right because of a lack of access to education after they were forced to flee their homes. Our correspondent in Italy has been meeting with some of the unaccompanied minors who have arrived there. The state is obliged to guarantee their access to free education.
Yassine was just 12 years old when he arrived in Italy in 2016, having left his native Guinea. Without his parents, alone, he travelled to Libya. He then crossed the Mediterranean to Italy, where he was taken in by an Italian family in Sicily.
In my country, there are many negative things because there's a war. I only went to school from time to time. In wartime, parents don't take their kids to school because they're scared.
Yassine was able to go to school full-time when he arrived in Italy. He quickly achieved good academic results and was even given the role of delegate representing the school's 580 students.
I realize that I'm very lucky compared to other children who are the same age as me.
Like Yassine, several refugees under 18 are enrolled in Italian schools, as the state is obliged to guarantee access to free education to unaccompanied children that arrive in the country. Samir is Egyptian. His first challenge is to learn the new language.
It's a bit difficult for him. He has to follow a different program to the other students because he's learning Italian. So it's difficult to talk to him about Italian literature.
To help these students catch up, volunteers come every week to this residential care home in Rome to give them extra teaching. Their aim? To help them pass the exam, certifying a minimum level of Italian.
In Italy, school is obligatory. Children must study till they reach a minimum level so that they can read, understand and express themselves, so that in the future they can work and build a life for themselves in Italy.
There are currently an estimated 10,000 unaccompanied foreign minors enrolled in schools in Italy.